The other day, I was in a panel discussion and there was some really lively conversation happening in the comments. And someone posted this: the product must go out when we, management, said it must go out, regardless of the state of the product to fulfill its promises. Now, I think this person was being kind of facetious. They didn't actually mean it, but this is something that leaders do say. And when a request like this comes along, sometimes you don't really have a choice but to release what you've got right now. Obviously, you're going to try to push back, but sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you figure out that that would be a career limiting move and you have to launch now. That's a problem because the product's not ready yet. Customers are not going to get their needs met. You might get complaints. There could be security issues even. All kinds of problems crop up when you launch before you're ready. And we, as the product managers and the product leaders, we're the ones who get held accountable when there is a problem. So we want to avoid this as much as possible. And once this request comes to you, you can push back, and I encourage that. But usually by that point, management's made up their mind. They've made commitments. This thing has to go out now. So the best thing you can do is avoid getting to this point in the first place. I'm Laura. I'm a product leader specializing in B2B software, and I have seen this situation come up so many times. So I'd like to talk about how to deal with this, but more importantly, how to avoid it in the first place. Now, sometimes it's true. The product really does need to go out right now before it's necessarily ready. And that could be for a number of business factors, like investors are screaming, you have a VIP customer or a whale customer that absolutely needs some feature right now. And if you don't launch it, you're going to lose them as a customer. These things happen and they're not ideal situations, but if the world were perfect, they wouldn't really need us so much. So sometimes you do have to roll with it and mitigate any issues that arise. Hopefully you've been doing some risk management. Hopefully you've been iterating in a way where you can release certain parts of the product without necessarily launching the entire thing, or you might be able to have something that's pretty much ready for prime time and ready to go when that request comes along, but sometimes you just have to do it. The best way to avoid getting to this point, though, is open and clear and regular communication with every stakeholder. And I start to feel like a broken record sometimes because I answer almost every question with, you should never have this problem because you were communicating and forming relationships the whole time. But it's true. Forming relationships with your stakeholders, and that includes your management, your investors, your leadership team, all of those folks, and communicating with them openly and regularly can head off a lot of these problems. So you should be aware that a launch is coming, that there's a request incoming. And again, sometimes management doesn't even know about these things before they become urgent, but they should be keeping you in the loop on any upcoming deadlines or requests that they know about so that you can get ahead of them proactively. The other thing that you can do is communicate to management about what's going on with the product. What's our status? Where are we at? How far out are we from a launch? Are we on track or not? What potential blockers or problems might be arising, what additional resources you might need in order to meet really tight deadlines, anything like that that you can provide so that management can make those decisions better. So that way, when someone does come along and say, hey, we want this launched next week, the leadership team then has the ability to push back on those requests a little bit to buy you a little bit more time. So in that way, you can really form a partnership with your leadership team. So you're both working together against ridiculous deadlines or the need to launch before you're really ready. Now, here's the really frustrating part. Some leadership folks just aren't really great at this. They don't necessarily take the time to listen to what you're saying, or they don't hear what you're saying when you tell them about timelines or features or roadmaps or anything like that. They just sort of want what they want. And they really do take this attitude of, the product needs to be ready when I say it needs to be ready because I'm in charge. And there's not much you can do about that because the simple truth is those folks are not great leaders. They're just bosses, and they can really put their teams in a bad spot. Sometimes it's through poor planning or poor communication with their own stakeholders so that they get blindsided by emergency requests. Sometimes it's poor planning on their part that turns things into an emergency. Sometimes they just aren't in tune with what their teams are trying to say and tell them, and they don't know what's going on, and they're not making the effort to find out. Sometimes they don't understand what product managers actually do and what it takes to build a software product. And I know that sounds ridiculous, especially if you're talking about the leadership team of a software company, but it happens. And I have talked to so many product managers who ask me, how do I deal with this problem or that problem? And at the end of the day, my answer to them is, give your boss my number, because the problem really lies with them and there's nothing you can really do to get ahead of this. That's really a shame when that happens, because all culture, all problems, and all successes start from the top. And so if you have a management team or a specific manager who's tripping you up with these kinds of requests frequently to launch before you're ready, there may not be much you can do about it other than putting everything in writing as a CYA. But if this does sound like something that your leadership team might be receptive to hearing about, do feel free to put them in touch with me. I'll post a link to my LinkedIn and my website below.